So let's jump into the first topic,
Yeah. Yeah.
gentrification, ATL, and everywhere else. So how this actually stemmed was
Hmm.
Tyler Perry is giving approximately 2.7 million dollars,
Hmm.
2.75, excuse me, $1 million to support seniors that are in ATL who are at
Hmm.
risk of losing their homes. And so, why this is a topic is that gentrification has always been an ongoing problem because it affects the lower income community. So, what they do is, just for those of you who don't know what gentrification is that they go into these low income areas and they basically start buying up property and even
Hmm.
forcing out the existing residents by either buying them out a lot of
Hmm.
times. They're putting things like stores, other things that will be helpful for those communities into those communities where more of the wealthy will be moving into.
Hmm.
So this is a common occurrence, a common problem. And I like to see that entertainers are getting involved and trying to help out this process, this issue that we have. So it's nice that we're throwing money at it, but how do we really
Hmm.
combat those issues is the question that I really have. So
Yeah.
I'm a cue it over to Keen Evolved to kind of talk to me a little bit more about that. Like, what is your thoughts about gentrification and what Tyler Perry is currently doing and how this is a stemming problem?
Well, I think that Tyler Perry is going about it the right way, and trying to help the people. The thing is, this is something that's happening in all cities, um, all major cities, so to speak. Usually the design in major cities was you have the downtown area, be it Houston, Chicago, Atlanta. And then on the outskirts of the downtown area, you have a lot of the ghettos,
Hmm.
unfortunately. So now, with the spread of the a lot of these companies coming in, they're trying to capture that land back pretty much for the most part.
Hmm.
For development, that land is becoming very valuable. You have large companies that are moving into downtown major metropolises, and they are redoing all of that. And it's a shame that they're pricing out people.
Yeah.
Um, in some cases, even back in the day, when I was growing up in Chicago, and I grew up, just to give you an idea, and some of the listeners might know, if they're familiar with Chicago, I grew up around the Bull Stadium, which is,
Oh
pretty
yeah.
close to the downtown area.
Hmm.
So when I was growing up, and that was 80s, 90s, kind of thing. That area was probably one of the worst areas because the projects was around and things like that. And as I got older, I noticed how, those people kind of disappeared, and
Hmm.
they kind of, they tore down the projects and they built
Hmm.
these condos that's worth $500,000.
Hmm.
Some areas, it seems like, even the area, like I said, that I grew up in, I go there now and it has a different name. It used to just be the West Side, now it's, called something else, but it's still interesting how that happens. You see people jogging down the street, especially, you see white people jogging down the street where,
Hmm.
you used to see gunfights and shootouts and people getting robbed and stuff like that. You see a Whole Foods coming up and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So it just looks different, it feels different. And you think to yourself, okay, something's not quite right,
Hmm.
because a lot of these people are being displaced. They're being put, into suburban areas now that were
Yes.
traditionally, these nice suburban areas, and they're grouping them all together in these areas. Now the crime is going out to the suburbs, because they're kind of taking back the city.
Yes. So Chicago is definitely that example of that. I'm born and raised on the south side of Chicago and saw that, areas of where I used to grow up at is
Mhm.
slowly starting to gentrify.
Mhm.
And more of us are moving out of the city
Mhm.
and moving into the suburbs. And then areas in the suburbs that used to be so nice where all the white folks are at, now you
Yeah.
have those who are on Section 8 vouchers,
Mhm.
especially from the projects. That's basically what they did was gave all of them the option to do the Section 8 vouchers, and so
Yeah.
now they're being displaced in many different areas around the Midwest, to be honest with you. So you have
Mhm,
a lot in Rockford, Illinois, that used to be a very nice area to be in. Now is
mhm,
it's pretty scary to go into. Then
mhm.
you have again people moving out to the suburbs or moving to Minneapolis or moving
Yep,
somewhere with that. So another stipulation too that is if they were to leave the city of Chicago, they can't come back with those vouchers, is what
correct.
my understanding is.
Yeah,
And so
yeah.
it's like there's like, you know what, we don't want any parts of you guys. You need to get gone. And that is an issue because gentrification can happen in two ways, not just in this
Mhm,
way. There's a gentrification where, like, for example, something just that's currently happening here in Madison. Madison, one of the bigger cities here.
mhm,
So SSM Health was literally building a new hospital in on the south side of Madison, and so
mhm.
that's predominantly where your minorities are staying. And
Yeah,
so what they
yeah.
thought by doing was, oh, you know what? Here's the kicker. We're gonna make jobs for you guys just so it can be okay for us to be in your community. But
Mhm,
all the while, which is very interesting, is that what they're thinking they're creating is basically keeping the status quo the way it is.
yeah.
So if you're creating these positions, you're creating frontline workers,
Mhm,
CNAs, dietary aides, those type of things, but you are not building opportunities for minorities to bridge into leadership roles, to be RNs, just only to pick up certain trades.
mhm,
So
mhm.
now you have these individuals working in a predominantly white environment, and
Yeah,
that because they don't necessarily understand the people, that then it's going to be a clash, right? And so you'll find more people
absolutely.
unemployed because they don't understand the cultural differences or wanting to understand it.
Mhm.
And so the opportunities you supposedly created aren't really there, right? So
Correct.
then
Yeah.
you're also helping to create poverty.
Mhm,
So those same individuals now have to go move to the outskirts of Madison or an area where it's less, it's cheaper to live, but they can't move around and get anywhere because they can't even afford a fucking car. Excuse me, a car.
correct.
And
It's
if they,
true. It's true.
they can't, and that's
Yeah,
how it is in the suburbs of Chicago, where
it's the same
before I
way.
before I even had a car, I could
Mhm,
not make it to these jobs on the bus and then maintain a job because
correct.
they're strict on, oh, you're late. you know, they're,
Absolutely.
they're like, oh, you're late. We're gonna
Yeah,
write your
yeah.
ass
We
up.
got a
Like,
problem.
wait,
We have a problem.
like I'm
Yeah,
trying to get here,
yeah.
but I can't. And then also, when you have those who do have a car, then you have to run the issue of, am I gonna get pulled over and maybe live after this? You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And so
Exactly.
it's just like it's so many things that goes on with the
Yeah.
gentrification piece that affects
Yeah,
other
absolutely.
areas. It does that
Yeah.
people don't tend to realize that it all piggybacks off
Mhm.
of each other, and
Yeah.
that with gentrification, it doesn't help the communities. If anything, it helps support the low income middle class. I mean, low income. Where they
Yeah.
can't survive. They don't have the resources. I'm like, you have it where um, the reverse happens, where black folks go into white areas, right?
Mhm,
And
mhm,
then they end up moving out of those areas because of black people moving in there. So then the dollars that
mhm,
was designated for that area is now gone away, and it becomes the
mhm.
same areas that you didn't want to really be in the first place, instead of
Exactly.
just sitting there just like everybody else and allowing for the diversity to actually happen. You know what I mean? Where we
Mhm,
wouldn't have
mhm.
those issues, where it could be the equality everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
You
It's
know,
just
and
like,
the thing is with the public transportation in the suburban areas, usually it stops running after a certain time.
yes.
So literally, if you haven't done what you need to do by say 10 o'clock, you're pretty much stuck.
Actually, 8 o'clock, because depending on where you
Mm,
get your sometimes eight, seven, even earlier than that. Some routes stop at 5 o'clock. And I'm like, damn, like I do have to work. You know what I mean?
exactly, exactly. I gotta work.
Like
What's going on? Yeah.
like those who work for a good example of that, like, back in the day where everybody wanted to work for UPS because UPS was like making money and people like that
Oh
was
yeah,
everybody like
UPS
that
was
was the
it.
money. They like,
Yeah,
that's the lick. But you
that's
have to
it.
take all these buses just to get there. It takes 2 hours in Jesus' name. Like, come on now. And so, that becomes taxing and tiresome. But who's really getting those jobs is the low income people. So the jobs are
Yeah.
not closer to the groups of people that they're really marketing to, honestly, that
Hmm.
will actually
Hmm.
do the job. So this has been a ongoing issue that just really need to be rectified. Um, so I guess my question would be, what are some of your thoughts on how that could be rectified in terms of the gentrification? Wow, I can't even speak today. The gentrification. What are some of your thoughts on that and how we can rectify that issue?
I think still within that gentrification process, there still needs to be equality. There still needs to be some of those policies that will allow for those low income, individuals with those vouchers to live in that area. I think that also, um, some of the things is with education. So if you don't know what's happening to you, how can you take action
That's true.
to prevent it? And also, on another side of just education, we also have to educate ourselves on how the effects of being so-called low income is affecting your life and generationally your children. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I grew up on Section 8, because my mom, we were on Section 8 and, we had reduced rent and all that kind of stuff. But our parents instilled in us that us, meaning me and my sister, I have a
Hmm.
sibling, um, that we are going to work hard. They instilled in us that education was the key in
Hmm.
order for us to break those bonds,
Hmm.
of financial, oppression, so to speak. And that's what we kind of internalize that to go and get higher levels of education, apply that to our lives in order for us to get higher paying roles. And you don't necessarily have to, go and, you can go and get a trade. You can go and become a nurse. You can go and, have, go into programming, which doesn't require you to have any type of degree nowadays, and you can change your life.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the things that has to, we have to instill in those people, black, brown, so we can make that difference. And also talk to your alderman, being more involved in your community. So when the first building is coming up versus the last and everything in between. Know that timeline for construction, know what they're doing, know what areas they're about to affect, so then you'll know how it's gonna affect you. Because it might be you hear that they're gonna, you have your neighborhood slotted for gentrification in the next 5 years. You might say, well, hey, I see that as a business opportunity for me to buy some of these old properties up, and I'm
Hmm.
gonna sell that to them at a premium. Depends on how much they want it. So now you're providing wealth within
Hmm.
your own self and generational wealth at that.
And I'm glad that you said that. It's we do need to properly educate ourselves because I think that a lot of times people go based off, oh, this is what they say, this is what they say. I'm like, no, you need to research for yourself what is out
Correct. Who
there.
is they? Right. I hate
Right?
when
Who
people
are
say
the they?
they.
Like
Yeah,
they?
who
I'm
are
like,
the they?
who they? And
Yeah.
just kind of
Yeah.
really understand. I think that's also another problem that we have in our community is really understand how that affects us and how it affects our children to come because you have a
Hmm.
lot of families that are affected by it, and if your family is going down the same path that
Hmm.
maybe you should kind of pay attention to what's happening around you versus the irrelevant things that it isn't necessarily should be on your radar. If that makes sense.
Yep.
It's like we pay attention to the weirdest things that we should be paying attention to the things that are much important to our everyday lives and how we live our lives. So that was I think that's one of the key factors I think that you hit on. And then also of course how do we get ourselves out of these type of situations is again education and really we got to really better
And
ourselves.
awareness.
You know,
Yeah.
that we have to put the work in. So you can't be mad when these things happen if you don't
Hmm.
pay attention or if you don't even attempt to educate yourself or even better yourself. Yes, you were on Section 8 doesn't mean that you have to stay there, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Yes, you did not, we all didn't have the best life, doesn't mean that we have to stay there. You have to put the
Stay
work in
exactly.
there,
You
put
got
the
to put the
work in
work in.
there, educate yourself, and really put the work in. Not just for
Absolutely.
yourself, but in your community. If you love your community, put the work into it. you know.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Like back in the day, my mom would volunteer for stuff for the schools, and she'll
Hmm.
try to do some stuff, at least to find out what's happening. If you're a stay-at-home mom, you might as well kind of figure out what's happening.
Yeah.
But if
Yeah.
you're even if you're a mother or a father who works, you still need to be in the know what's happening. Like my husband and I don't have children, but we still want to know what's happening around in our community because we need to
Absolutely.
know.
Hmm.
Hell, I got an app on my phone to let me know, hey, about break-ins before it even got reported on the news. You know,
Oh man, me too. Next
yeah,
door.
yeah, next door, yeah. I got my husband to sign up for that. I'm like, we need to know what's
Exactly.
happening. And I'm
Exactly.
like,
You
I
want
ain't
to
finna just wait
know.
for the news because everybody
Yeah.
talk. And I was like, no, let me
People
do
talk.
this. So that way I can keep myself protected, but also know what's happening. Just the same as the mailers that came in about when they were trying to open up the Mexican spot because they wanted to have a liquor license. Um,
Mm.
it was another spot that opened up that uh I forgot it was another spot, but they let us know what's happening.
Hmm.
Pay attention to those things that are coming on and
Pay
really
attention.
be in tune, and then talk. So I think that's what I think that's the gist of what we're trying to say is that you got to put the work in here. We can't keep waiting for Captain Save a Hole. You can't, it's a Captain Save a Hole situation.
You
Like,
gotta save yourself. You gotta save
save
yourself.
yourself.
Save your
Like,
family. Right.
hey
Right.
ho, save yourself.
Save
You
yourself.
just can't.
Who? Hey
Hey
who?
ho, hey ho. Save yourself here. Save
Save
yourself. What are
yourself.
you
Who?
doing?
Right.
So it's just like you can't expect for like. Don't get me wrong. I love what Tyler Perry is doing in this. He has always been doing is supporting the community that he loves. There's nothing wrong
Hmm.
with that,
Hmm.
but the community also has to learn to support themselves. You have to learn
Absolutely.
to be
Absolutely.
efficient for yourselves. Like it's nice, okay,
Absolutely.
thank you for helping us, but if he's going to help us, he can help us in other areas to build up like a Wakanda. But we got to help
Exactly.
ourselves as the community in which
I
we
agree.
love. So
I agree.
that's just my thoughts on it. So
Yeah.
I guess my
Yeah. Well,
pay,
it was good that he's doing that, for Atlanta,
yeah,
because Atlanta has seen a lot of change,
yeah.
and some of us as African American people, we have benefited from that change.
Hmm.
I know some people that live in historical Collier Heights, that purchased low, and now it's worth 3 times the amount of what they purchased it for. And if you didn't get in at that time, then you're kind of on the outs, so to speak, unfortunately.
Yeah,
Um,
you are.
yeah, and I just the main thing that I hate about the entire scenario is that we don't take into account our elderly. They don't take into account the elderly population that is on a fixed income. They probably have, retirement and, getting some, benefits, but it's not enough to sustain, a rent that's $2,000 a month.
Exactly. And I think that's also where part of that is lost with even the younger generation and even some of us older generation is not realizing that we're going to be old too. That's
Absolutely.
the reality.
Absolutely.
We're going to be old too. This is going to affect us too. So we need to stop and thinking about, oh, in the moment, we need to think about the future and how that's affecting us and our children.
I agree. I
So
agree.
it's just like I think that's another issue. So I guess my question to the audience is, what are your thoughts about gentrification and how can we do better at this, and how do we do better at the gentrification in the brown and
Hmm.
black communities?
Hmm.
But no, that's man, that was deep, wasn't it? Wasn't that deep?
Absolutely.